everybody, welcome back to Unlimited Commander. I'm Adam, and I'm joined, as always, by my lovely co-host, Matt. Matt, how's it going?
Oh, it's going pretty good. I have a friend coming into town this week, so I spent a lot of time cleaning up all the rooms that they might actually be able to come in and hang out in. And I played way too much Breath of the Wild yesterday, or Tears of the Kingdom yesterday, and it was a lot of fun. But the first time around, we had a shock to our system due to storyline. No spoilers, so I won't say anything. And then the second time around, I went into a spooky bit of the game that had an enemy that they brought back from old Zelda games that give me nightmares normally. So I was in a place for a little bit. But one of our fellow stream watchers said that she really was enjoying watching me creep around and be scared by every movement in the thing. So
yeah, I've been looking at starting some spooky games because I don't like being scared in games.
Mm-hmm.
But much to the same, like, viewership seems to really enjoy when you're like pooping your pants a little.
Yeah.
And I've been looking at getting some of those games into my my repertoire as well, just because everybody gets a good kick out of watching you like jump up and bah.
It's true.
So.
I was sitting there. I don't know if I didn't do too much jump scared type things, but I was sitting there the whole time like, oh, I don't wanna. Please don't make me go around this corner.
But that's okay. It sounds like you had a lot of fun, and apparently those hanging out with you had a good time too. And that's really why we do it, is so that we can have a good time while other people are having a good time with us. That's why I stream anyway.
Always. And I'm really excited to continue on in Tears. It's going to be hard not streaming as much of it this week because I have a friend in town. I'm just not going to do it. Unless he wants to sit behind me and criticize me while I play.
That's possible.
How about you?
I'm doing all right. I spent my weekend like revamping my stream setup, moving my monitors around, changing which camera is where now. So this one used to be the top-down cam for when we were doing spell table games, and I swapped those around. Now it's over here. I don't know. It's probably out of frame. I'm not going to show it, but somewhere in this direction is the top-down cam that I use when I'm doing spell table games and or Lego builds. That's pretty good right now.
Also, cat cam
and cat cam
and cat cam.
You too can see squints on my stream. So I do have a cam set up so that I can do a couple different varieties of things over here, and I just switched it from what was my face cam, and now it's this thing, which I think is going to be a little bit nicer for my face, but we'll see how it goes. I really just wanted to get into it and mess with some stuff because sometimes it's nice to just like tear stuff apart, move some lights, change also because the camera I was using resets its settings every time you turn it on. Mm-hmm. So when I like changed my exposure amount on it, because I was getting whited out like crazy, so I turned the exposure down. It looked decent, and then I turned things off, turned them on again, and it was just like back to square one. Like having a white, like when we have like our notes, our show notes, I have them on the monitor here, and when it was white, it was just like, ooh, it was like a spotlight, like a lighthouse in my face, and you can see it every time. And like it still does that, but it's not as bad now.
Yeah.
Anyway, so that's a view into the behind the scenes of how we do stuff around here. That's about it, though. Also, yes, I'm building the Optimus Prime Lego set on stream right now, and it is pretty awesome. It's pretty awesome.
I was watching that stream. It looked like you were having a lot of fun, just like kind of tinkering with all the pieces, and it's coming together pretty cool.
Yeah, it's not bad, and it's like I was on somebody else's, like I was sitting in somebody else's stream yesterday, I think, while I was doing some stuff, and this individual had the DeLorean Lego set, and it looked real nice, and so they had it. I called it out. I said, "Oh my gosh, you got this on there? That's super cool." I says, "Yeah," and he shows it off, and he says, "I got something larger because I didn't want to just get like a small Lego set and then want to keep building." And I understood instantly because we only got through 4 out of 10 bags in this Lego set. and it was still like 4 hours, and I still want to build more. And I think that this is going to be like, get a bigger one. It sounds like they're way more expensive. Lego is asinine at how expensive it is. But like, if you do get a bigger one, then you're not just going to keep dumping into smaller ones. Get something fulfilling and large, so that by the time you're done, you feel accomplished and you're like, I can put this down now. So yeah, that's what's going on with me. Not too much super craziness, just a couple fun things going on. Yeah.
And you all can participate in those fun things by going to our separate Twitch channels, which show up at the end of the show.
Yeah. Stay tuned after when we do our closing credits, and you can find out where to find us. We talk about it all the time, all of our socials, all of our streams. Come check us out. We're pretty fun after the show, too. Speaking of fun, what are we doing today?
So we noticed that we've been having a lot of fun doing these episodes where we talk about a particular mechanic or a card type. The Planeswalkers one was really fun to do. We did a little retrospect on battles when they first were being shown off. And we just like being able to talk about cards and do what we want. So I thought that maybe we could do one on the Lord of the Rings mechanic, and we kind of decided that we were going to go ahead and do it on all of the external mechanics. So these are the mechanics that exist in the game that you have to keep track of that are outside of the game. The things that we use emblems to track or things like that. So we have 4 of those set up ready to go, technically 5. And we're going to kind of go through them one by one and do our thing where we talk about how it is in whatever formats that you want to see it in. So break down by sealed and draft, talk about Commander as a constructed format, and then talk about Cube and see how we think it fits in whatever cube you're doing. So if you like to see that kind of stuff, that's what we're in for today.
That's what we're here for today. So I'm going to kick us off because this one, I don't know how it played at the time, but we're going to start with like the quintessential. When we talk about these types of external mechanics, there's one that always comes to mind that is like beloved. And it's always the benchmark. So we're going to talk about it first because everything kind of relates back to it. We're talking about Monarch. Monarch, of course, being the mechanic where when an action is taken, somebody is then granted the title of Monarch. It's basically just a title, really. It has like a small mechanical advantage where at the end of your turn, you draw a card if you are the Monarch. And whenever you receive combat damage by an opponent's creature, that opponent then becomes the Monarch. And it's this real fun mechanic, a little bit of a mini game where you start chasing the Monarch title around the table and watching it bounce around. Some decks do a really good job of like manipulating that. A lot of the decks that it's heavy in gain benefit. Like there's usually also additional benefit in the cards that grant it. So, for example, one of my commander decks is Queen Marchesa, and when you are not the Monarch, like when she comes in, you become the Monarch, and then when you are not the Monarch, you gain a token on your upkeep as long as you are not the Monarch. So the idea being, you play Queen Marchesa, you become the Monarch, you let somebody poke you, they become the Monarch, and then the rest of the table chases it around the table, and you just sit there gaining value from not being the Monarch. But more commonly, and like a really well-known cycle came out in Commander Legends, which was I just blanked on it. It's the one where like there's one in each color, they're all monocolor, and if you aren't the Monarch, you do a thing, and if you are the Monarch, you do a better thing.
Yes, I do know those cards, and they all have names.
Every one of them.
And every one of them has the same word in the name. It's a cycle.
Yep.
And it's court of something, right?
Court. There you go.
I did it. There you go.
The court cycle. So I don't know how much of that is going to stay in the episode. I don't know. That's probably pretty funny to watch it struggle, but at the same token, there was a lot of like ums and ahs and quiet. So like one that I like playing and does quite a lot of work in token deck is Court of Grace. So Court of Grace being 2 white for an enchantment, and when it enters the battlefield, you become the monarch. And at the beginning of your upkeep, create a 1/1 spirit creature token with flying. And if you are the monarch, you make a 4/4 angel. So on top of having the ability to draw an extra card if you're the monarch, there's also lots of mechanics that care about who is or you are the monarch, that kind of thing. And it set an example for what can be a really fun and robust mechanic while being simple. It's stupid simple, but it has, aside from cards that reference it, there's no like permanent that matters. This is why we mean by external. Says the best you get is they printed a token that said monarch, and then it says at the beginning of your end step, draw a card. That's the whole thing.
Mm-hmm.
And that was the only thing that it had to do with like a physical card in the game. And it does a really good job of creating a little bit of a mini game, a little bit more excitement. There's lots of people in Commander games who have just decided as a house rule that somebody's the monarch at the beginning, or first blood gets monarch, because it's that good of a mechanic that people just want it right away.
Mm-hmm.
I only have experience in a couple areas, but you played Conspiracy in Limited, right?
I did. So Conspiracy and Conspiracy Take the Crown. I believe Conspiracy Take the Crown is where Monarch actually first came into place. But they are both draft matter sets. So this is actually something that you do not play in sealed. You can go back to our last episode where we talk about turning things into sealed to find out how you might be able to do that. But since the set has so many cards that have draft matters abilities, it is a drafting set. And the way you play Conspiracy is you draft in an 8-pod, and then you play in 2 pods of 4. So it's a multiplayer format when it gets played the way that it's supposed to be played. Take the Crown was an amazing set. It was super fun. It was a great addition to what Conspiracy had shown in the past, because the first Conspiracy set was really, really good. Monarch is the kind of thing in that format that does everything that you want it to do. It speeds up games. It keeps people from like nesting, because that's a big problem in multiplayer games, is you get a player who is just like, oh yeah, I've got a 7/7 flyer and 2 5/5s on the ground and all this other stuff, but I'm not going to attack because I don't want to get hit. So I'm going to just hold back my battle cruiser until I can win against everybody. And that usually just makes games take forever and doesn't actually seal them any sort of victory. So the Monarch changes that, because it makes you want to be more aggressive, because you want that card advantage. And making life totals go down makes the game go faster. Whether or not you want it to, it makes the game go faster. So Monarch hit all of those nice notes. And in draft, in Conspiracy Take the Crown, it was very good. It was something that was sought after a lot, especially because of cards like Queen Marchesa and things like it, that added Monarch into the game and then gave you either something for being Monarch or something for not being Monarch. And you could play with those push-pull mechanics a lot. It was very fun.
Yeah, it just was a thing that I didn't get to participate in. I'm not mad about like what it's done since then. I think that that's like really cool. And it's the kind of thing where like it doesn't show up on very many cards. A quick Scryfall search here shows me that 32 cards contain the Oracle text, the Monarch. And that's in the entirety of Magic. Like it's been printed in Commander Precons, Commander Legends, and as you said, Take the Crown. And that's it. And it's still, despite that, like one of the most beloved mechanics that players have found and grasped onto. It shows up at all rarities. You can have common cards that make you the Monarch. Some as simple as like Palace Sentinels, 3 and a white for a 2/4 human soldier, simply says you become the Monarch. Perfect. That's a great common, right? As many of those as you can get, because it just, the other nice thing too is that like if somebody else is the Monarch and you play a card that gives you the monarchy, you take it. It's really nice, because then it just like comes to you. It's not the kind of thing where like once it's out you have to earn it back every time. Cards can just like make you the Monarch again, so that's kind of cool.
I think one of the things that we're talking about right here that's super important, that is going to affect some of the things that we're going to talk about here in the future, is that because the Monarch as a mechanic is so solid, the cards that enhance the mechanic tend to find a lot of balance. And I think part of the reason why we don't see like 100, 200 cards that have Monarch on it, even at this point with Take the Crown being back as far back as it was, is because they know that the mechanic does so much work that they don't want everything to be able to introduce it, right?
Mhm.
Because of how much work the actual mechanic does, which we will see in future things here in a couple. I'm not going to spoil anything, that's not always a good thing.
Yeah. Yeah, and like, and as you said, this is the benchmark. Like, speaking, I guess this one's real easy because we're speaking so highly of it. Like, as far as
Mhm.
Commander Constructed goes, as I've already said, like, it's beloved. Please
Mhm.
include it in as many of your decks as you possibly can fit it in. It just does work. It makes a neat little interaction and kind of like shakes up the table. I don't
Mhm.
need to say too much more on that. I will also say put it in your cubes.
I think so. I think that you should have in basically, I would say try to put in like 10 Monarch starters in every cube, try like 2 in each color or something like that, just to give your cube that the ability to start pushing the Monarch, because it only enhances the game's ability to play.
Mhm.
And that's what you want. You want those highly aggressive games.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Like, I don't know what number I would choose for like my own cube, but I know that like there isn't a single card that gives Monarch that isn't like half decently worth it.
Hmm.
I mean, you have mediums like board wipes. There's Feast of Succession for black for all creatures get -4 till end of turn. You become the Monarch. Like, if you're looking to fill in a little bit of board wipe action in your cube, there's something for that. Fall from Favor was expected to do a lot of work in like in legacy formats,
Hmm.
eternal formats. That's the one. Like 2 and a blue for an aura that taps the creature if what is it? When it enters the battlefield, tap enchanted creature, and you become the Monarch, and the creature doesn't untap during its controller's untap step unless that player is the Monarch.
Hmm.
So like it flavors a lot of things that you're going to want to flesh out anyway. There's not a whole ton of these that are just like bombs on their own. I mean, and if you really want to, if you're trying to do something fun like that, you can play Starscream Power Hungry.
Hmm.
That introduces Monarch into the game in a fun way.
My favorite.
So like play it. It's good all around, and that's why we got it out of the way first, because everything is going to compare to this. This is an example
Hmm.
of something that they did really well, and has even in its reprints, or not reprints, but like in its printings in other sets as they've continued to expand on it, it hasn't been done wrong. I don't think there's a single Monarch card that you look at and you're like, that's way too potent. There's maybe a couple that are a little
Hmm.
soft, which happens with everything, right? As I said, there's like it would be vanilla if it wasn't for the fact that it gave you Monarch.
Hmm.
But like things like we talked about the court cycle, all of those are solid,
Hmm.
every one of them. And you can just like fit them in, but none of them are broken. You're not going to play a Monarch card and be like, haha, I win now. Do
Right.
it, play it. They're good.
Absolutely. And into another one that I feel is pretty good, we're going to talk a little bit about venturing into the dungeon and the initiative as sort of a sidestep. That's why I said 4, kind of 5.
4 or 5
So
ish.
basically, venture into the dungeon means this. Basically, it's tied to a set of 3 outside of the game dungeons. And when you venture into the dungeon, you choose a dungeon if you haven't had one already, and you start walking through it. As you walk through it, you get into incremental value pushing through each dungeon. When you reach the end of a dungeon, you have completed it and you can start a new one the next time you do a venture. Then Initiative took that up a step, added a 4th dungeon called the Undercity, which you can only get into through taking the initiative. And taking the initiative works much like getting the Monarch. Either a card says you take the initiative, or you deal combat damage to a player who has the initiative. If no one manages to deal combat damage to you until your next upkeep, then you will continue through whatever dungeon you're in, including the Undercity if that's the one that you got into.
I was going to say the other thing too about initiative specifically is that if you have the initiative on your upkeep, then you still proceed. It's the only one that works that way, though.
Exactly.
Venturing in the dungeon is a triggered, like a mechanic with triggers. You can only venture if a card says to do so. But with initiative, if you start the upkeep with the initiative, you venture further into the Undercity. Actually, I think it works with any dungeon, right? Like if you're in a dungeon and you have the initiative on your upkeep, you venture again.
Correct. If you're in a dungeon and you have initiative, you continue venturing, and you can use venture into the dungeon when you're in the Undercity to keep moving through the Undercity. The only weirdness about that is if you are not in the Undercity and you have to have the initiative to get in there. So this mechanic in particular is very interesting to me. This is another one that doesn't have a ton of cards behind it. There are 57 cards that mention venture, as in venture into the dungeon. And then there's another handful, 28 more cards that involve the initiative. Altogether, we're still looking at less than 100 cards that deal with this particular mechanic. And again, this mechanic is very good because it provides you incremental value, and it's worthwhile. Even the smallest dungeon ends with draw a card. And the bigger dungeons have really big things like look at the top 10 cards of your deck and put one of them into play, or one of them has like cast something for free. Another one makes you a 5/5 Death Touch Menace or something like that. Like just these decently heavy sized effects, and you can repeat these processes. And then there are also cards that complement them that say when you complete a dungeon, do something, or get something for the number of complete dungeons you have, or whatever. And all of these things mash together into making a really cool thematic deck that you have to kind of put a little more effort into. So unlike the Monarchy, where it gives you value all the time, so you just need to get it on the board and it goes. Initiative has that, but venture does not. So if you really want to capitalize on all these incremental gains, you build a deck that focuses on the dungeon aspect. And it creates one or two really, really cool decks, and then initiative exists to fill in the blanks to be more like Monarch.
Yeah, it's kind of like a mashup, right? Your classic like techno song with an old country song, and now you've got this new hotness, and we called it initiative.
Yes,
it's not bad. Like neither of them are bad. I guess that's a pretty clear explanation. We don't need to go into like my specific opinions on it. I would like more so to hear like how did it do in like dungeons. I guess I don't know if you played Battle for Baldur's Gate in like limited or sealed, like draft or sealed.
I have played both Battles for Baldur's Gate and AFR in draft and sealed. And you know, I feel like initiative hit the point better than venture did, unfortunately, because of those 57 cards that have venture in them, not all of those are from AFR. Some of them are from the Commander product, some of them are from whatever. And so there wasn't really quite a good spearhead of venture in the first set in AFR to really get a good beat on it in draft or sealed. You might run a couple of the cards and you're hoping maybe you'll just push through the Mine of Fendelver, the one that draws you a card at the end, just to get a little bit of value. But you're not likely to be able to build like a deck that repeatedly delves into the dungeon. In draft, though, a lot of those cards that did delve into the dungeon also like had Death Touch or some kind of unblockable effect, and then when you deal combat damage, you get to venture. So you just get to get in a couple of extra hits, which got in more damage, which puts you into the right place. I think if they were remaking venture from the start again, there'd probably be less ETB triggers and more triggers that happen through course of gameplay in order to make it happen. which is why initiative ended up kind of the way it did, I think.
Mhm. I think one of the major things too that like kept it from being like really popular as far as like even in like the sets that it was in is that like it added a significant amount of complexity,
Mhm.
and that's almost more noted in like draft and sealed, I think, because you have like there's it's you don't make really complex decks very often in like a limited format, right? You get what you get, and you can't really build cool combos or anything
Mhm.
unless you're really lucky, and even then like you still only end up with one ofs in your deck. And
Mhm.
so like maybe you get like the magical Christmas land, but you don't get the opportunity to like really construct something that like blows people out of the water, and therefore it's usually a simpler experience, more frustrating for me personally, but like simpler.
Mhm.
And and I think that like the complexity of like which dungeon you're going to go into, all the different choices in a dungeon, like the amount of decision paths that it creates kind of has a bit of a hampering. Like there are clear paths in some of them if you're, like you built your deck a certain way and you knew that like you were going to get the most benefit out of a certain path. But
Mhm.
like none of the effects in any of the dungeons are so backbreaking either that like until you get to the end, and even then, that it's going to be the kind of thing where like, oh man, I can't wait to at least get to this so I can like sword somebody's thing. Like that's not a
Mhm.
thing in the dungeon, right? Like they played it safe but complex, and I feel like that's a weird space, especially in limited.
I would say in limited for sure. In constructed though, um, you really can't ask for more than getting creatures at value that also give you incremental value along the way. And so, in a lot of formats where there's constructed, I am going to talk a little bit about Commander, but also like Canadian Highlander. Initiative sees a lot of play in Canadian Highlander, and there's a very worthwhile dungeon deck in, I believe the name of the card is Sephirus.
Yeah,
That
the Esper commander one.
Yeah, you got it. Yeah, it's a very interesting card. It does a lot of work, and it's there's a deck in there that you can play where you're getting room effects twice and all this other stuff moving through, and it's just as bad as like Panharmonicon or Tesa or whatever, where these small value things aren't really that big of a deal by themselves, but when you start doubling them up, or you can do it 3 or 4 times in a turn, or something like that, it exponentially increases the value of each individual card because you're getting all of these effects wound through. I have played a dungeon deck in the past that I can get through the Mad Mage in one turn. And being able to get through Dungeon of the Mad Mage from first to last in one turn is like 6 cards of value. And that's insanity. So, like,
So that's what I was referring to though. Like in
mhm,
constructed, you can actually choose and get there,
mhm,
right? You're not
right.
just like shuffling in whatever mid uncommon in your colors to finally get your 40 card deck going, right? Like it's different. If you can say, okay, I'm gonna commit to this, I'm gonna figure out everything I need to do to like go through these dungeons because that's where my value hits. And like as especially in something like you were saying, Sephirus of the Hidden Ways, for
Mhm.
one, so for a white, a blue, and a black for a 2/3 human wizard, and whenever one or more creature cards are put into your graveyard from anywhere, venture into the dungeon. This it triggers once each turn. And then whenever you complete a dungeon, return target creature card from your graveyard to the battlefield. So in something like that, like you would be picking all of the best venture cards as along with like a couple of like sacrifice effects. You would design it around how fast can I get through these dungeons, because every time you do, you get to what's a good representation of this card? Flicker Wisp? No. Karmic Guide?
Karmic Guide. Yep. You get a Karmic
Say
Guide.
Karmic Guide? Right? You get a Karmic
Hmm.
Guide whenever you go through a dungeon.
Yep.
That's worthwhile.
And if you're completing a dungeon every turn, you basically got a Caracas out or Amiria.
Yeah, yeah.
Yep.
Mirror the Sky Ruin. So like in constructed, and you're right, it's agnostic to the format you're playing. If you're going to be playing this
Hmm.
in a constructed format, now you couldn't play this specific card because it was the face card of a commander deck, and you wouldn't have
Hmm.
cracked it in the sealed format. But or in standard or whatever. But like,
Right.
let's just taking a look at it holistically. If you're playing a constructed deck around dungeon or initiative or some mixture of the two would likely be your best bet. You're gonna get there because that's your whole jam.
Yeah.
Right? If your whole thing is how fast can I like steamroll these dungeons, you're gonna get there.
Hundo. As far as cube goes, I don't know what you're going to say about it, but I know what I'm going to say about it. Yeah, you're saying no. You're saying no, right?
I'm gonna vocalize. I did an action, but for those on the audio only format, I was definitely doing the throat cutting motion. I do not recommend these in anybody's cube. It just takes up too much. You might get away with like the odd initiative card because once it's out, it persists like Monarch. But the complexity that it adds is probably not going to be worth your while. I think that even if you add one in.
Yeah. My personal opinion is very similar. I think actually initiative is fine. If you throw initiative in without any venture, you're going to be fine because it does add a little bit of complexity. But with people, that's not a bad thing. Like a lot of players actually like a little bit of complexity in their thing. And like Monarch, it gives you a reason to attack. So it gives you a reason to keep the game moving forward because it gives you some value on that situation. Venture, I believe, will be too complicated. So unless you're building a cube specifically toward like, I really like Venture, I really like Initiative, I would say leave it out. Leave out Venture as much as you can because it's just too much.
The big part about a cube with either of these two is the other thing. Like I think that like for the odd time, and I know like you're not necessarily wrong. I'm not openly disagreeing with you about Venture. It's the better of the two if you're going to include. I think that like the amount of real estate in your like complexity is a weird word for it, but like the like putting one in and then like watching, I guess more to the point, you're going to just end up with a pile of missed triggers if there's one initiative card in the entire thing, and then people are just going to forget that it's there. Like if you put it in and you gain the initiative, cool, you go through once, maybe you miss it on your upkeep, somebody hits you, you forget to give it away. Like if it's not a focus, it's going to be lost in the sauce.
Exactly. But, and pairing into that, it's just like, think about how often you have to remind people to draw a card off a Monarch, which people want to draw that card of Monarch, and you still have to remind people to draw a card off Monarch. Now think about it as trying to remind them to continue down whatever dungeon they were in and do the next step of whatever that dungeon told them to do and all that stuff. It adds up.
And you reminded me of something else too, is because here's the difference between Monarch and like either of the dungeon mechanics. Specifically talking about them being an external mechanic. It's easy to make one of your tokens be the Monarch token, and you can pass that around, or you put a hat on somebody or some such thing like that. Like the ability to track the Monarch through a game is relatively simple. You are it, now you are it, now you are it. Like you can find something. Whereas for the venture mechanic and or the initiative, and maybe even the initiative is the better one to talk about, but then you get like this one dungeon out. You have to track where everyone is in that dungeon. Either they get their own unique dungeon and they're all putting like a marker on it, or you have one big one and each person has their own marker, and all for one card.
Yep.
Right, all for one card that you thought was going to be half decent in your cube. Like there are 25,000 Magic cards. Do yourself a solid. Pick a different one.
Just pick a Monarch card.
Pick a Monarch card, right? Like, and I'm not saying like I'm not poo-pooing on the mechanic. I mean, it's not my favorite mechanic. I've had thoughts of making a dungeon deck because it adds like a weird like Rube Goldberg mechanic to it that I personally would really enjoy. And there's a strong chance that I'm still going to come back to it one day. I just haven't gotten around to it. But as far as putting it in your cube goes, I think it just doesn't add enough for the effort that it's going to take you.
Understandable.
That's where I'm at. I'm not saying they're bad mechanics. Just do yourself a favor. Like, and as you said there's less than 100 cards in total, or about 100 cards that include either venture or dungeon, or either venture or initiative, rather. So like, your card selection, your card quality, like in order to fill it out so that it's actually viable in your cube, you have to make it an X percentage. And you're going to know that balance when you start putting it and finding it. And you're going to probably find that you're not having enough. Like I have a 400-ish card cube,
Mm-hmm.
and I don't think that there's enough good cards in that pile for my cube to be able to support it.
Mm-hmm.
Now, if you had a 1,000 card cube, it gets worse, right?
Yep.
Even if you put all 100 in, 10% of your cube, including the junk cards, because not all of those are good either,
Mm-hmm.
right? And we're talking about like
Real bad.
like
real bad.
That mono green legendary that cares about venturing, who I will put on the screen, but I'm not going to bother looking up because venture wasn't even the green mechanic.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
They didn't focus on it in green, and then they gave a green legendary along with I think Eliwick Tumblestrom, right? Yeah, like which is a decent card in and of herself, but like not enough to put into the thing. So like it's too much real estate. I think it's too much brain real estate. It's too much card real estate, and it's just not worth it.
Mm-hmm. We're going to talk about some more whack ones, but why don't we get into this week's randomizer real quick? We came up with a pretty decent one for the randomizer this week. We found Break Ties. So Break Ties is our 2 and a white instant. It's from Modern Horizons 2. It has choose one, destroy target artifact, destroy target enchantment, exile target card from a graveyard, and it has reinforce 1, which for a single white, you can discard this card and put a +1/+1 counter on a creature. So kind of a +1/+1 counter version of Cycle.
Mm-hmm.
This card in Sealed is definitely going to get included in your deck because you are in white and it has some versatility. It's good. It's fine. It does stuff. And worst case scenario, you can use it to put a +1/+1 counter on something, which is great.
Yeah, I would say that this is like I'm gonna skip ahead and I'm gonna just like group all these together. If we're talking about limited, like official limited and or cube, this is a perfectly fine Magic card. I think that this fills the slot like it's a slightly more expensive disenchant with a slightly more flexible effect, right? The potential of Grafsdigger's caging somebody's one thing seems fine. I think 3 is a little hot for that. But like to have it tied onto a disenchant is fine for 3.
If you need it, you need it. So
yeah,
right.
The reinforce I think is like fine, I guess. Gives it just a little bit more versatility. You draw 2 of the like you get 2 in your pool, you draw both of them, and you only see one thing across the board. Then the other one just buffs something. Cool. That's also a discard, so it's a lot like Channel, which has been pretty brought back into popularity. And as we know, Channel does not use the stack. You can use the reinforce ability at any time, not even instant speed, literally anytime.
Yep, literally anytime. Which is decent. Yep.
Yeah.
In Constructed, no. In Commander, you're not going to play this. There's way better stuff you can play.
Way better stuff.
Better stuff. At 2 in a single color, there's that one green card that like exiles up to 3 artifacts and enchantments or something like that.
We just saw this one.
It's so good.
It's from Ikoria. What's that one? Breakthrough or something? I can't remember.
Yeah, but
do I look it up right now?
Nah, we'll just throw it up on the screen. Here it is, Bubba.
I'll throw it up on the screen.
But
yay!
Yeah, 2 and a green, exile up to 3 artifacts and enchantments. Way better than 2 and a white. Get rid of, destroy one or the other, or exile a card. Even if you do get a +1/+1 counter, you're just not. You're not gonna need it. It's not worth it.
I mean, at this, and even just like at this mana and Constructed, like you don't care about the exile 1 card, you don't care about the reinforce in Commander or anything really. If you were using it, because it's out of Modern Horizons 2, and you will not be playing this in a Modern deck. Like Disenchant exists, it's 1 mana less, and it does 2 of the 4 things. It's fine. It's better than fine. It's a good Magic card, and like there's tons of other things that exist that would do something similar. Like Prismatic Ending exists. Does that hit stuff or just creatures? I don't remember.
I think it.
I don't mind being
wrong. I think
it
hits everything. I think it's permanent, not land permanent.
Sure. Right, for 3 mana, you could O-Ring, play into your, give yourself another white permanent in all sorts of different decks that care about white permanents or enchantments or whatever have you. Like, there's just what's that other one? The Fiend Hunter.
Yep, Fiend Hunter.
And then Relic Warden.
Palace
Like, there's
Jailer.
just yeah. So lots of stuff to do that's like better than this in constructed. Put it in your cube though. Put it in your cube
for sure. 100. Okay, I want you to introduce the next one because boy, oh boy, do I have thoughts on this.
Why am I not surprised? The next one we're going to talk about is the day-night cycle. And so the day-night cycle was introduced in the first one, right? It was Midnight Hunt?
Yes. Midnight Hunt is the first one, yes.
The day-night cycle was an expansion on the original transform mechanic for the werewolves, where I'm not even going to go into the old one. It sucks. Doesn't matter. Day-night means that, like, it is... Cards will come into play, and they are either day-bound or night-bound for the most part, and they say... or they just make it day or night. Like, a lot of them will say... How do I got to start this over.
It becomes day.
It's not even... It's so non-intuitive that I can't introduce this mechanic properly in a way that we feel comfortable with. So I'm going to try again, but I'm not going to cut this because everyone needs to know what day and night feels like to like your average person. So the day-night mechanic is a cycle of back and forthing where it's an external mechanic that tracks whether or not it is day or night. There are cards that will either make it day or night by playing them. There are cards that care about whether or not it is day or night. And then there are cards that change whether or not it is day or night. And then the day and night cycle itself is controlled by the number of spells a person plays on their own turn. So if it is currently day and you play no spells on your turn and pass the turn, then it becomes night. And if it is currently night and you cast 2 or more spells on your turn, it becomes day. And this cycle goes back and forth. And as soon as it is introduced, it remains in play for the remainder of the game, regardless of if you have no other cards in your deck that give one sniff about whether or not it's day or night. I have a deck based wholly around this mechanic, and I never play it. It's a flavor build because I was an original Innistrad player. I fell in love with the werewolves back in the day. And when they brought the new werewolves back, or new werewolves in, when they brought werewolves back, they introduced this day-night to try and fix the mechanic from back then. And I have a whole deck where it actually matters, and I still hate it.
Say it with me, everyone. This mechanic sucks. It sucks in every format. It sucks all over the place. Okay, so real quick, I'll just be very, very brief about it. Old werewolves changed under the same kind of circumstances, except without a binding mechanic. So original Innistrad werewolves, if you cast no spells during a turn, not your turn, but a turn, things would flip. If 2 or more spells were cast by a player, it would flip back. That was the way that the day and night worked in the time period. I love original Innistrad werewolves. I was a very big fan of werewolves at the time, and I found ways of playing some of the cool ones. I really like Mandronin Shaman. That's one of my favorites. And I would find ways to interact with these things. The problem with werewolves originally, and the problem that still persists with day and night, is that they are trying to make you benefit from not playing the game, because you only actually get the good side of the card if you manage to not play spells during a turn. And usually that's going to have to be your turn, because your opponents are going to try to play spells, not only because they don't want you to have night, but because they want to further their game process. And that's how you further the game, by casting spells and doing things. This is trying to give you a quote-unquote benefit for not casting spells. What usually ends up happening is by the time it ends up being your turn again, all of your stuff's back on day anyway, because somebody gained that value of getting to play 2 spells on the same turn. And even with you having night, most of these cards, most of the werewolves, most of the things that have day-night cycles are not even that great on the back. So sealed specifically, werewolves are okay if you can get enough of them in your packs. That's it. That's all I got. That's
So like having gone through the entire process of building a commander deck out of this, because like, and I went super flavor. So I like that is a flavor build through and through. All my removals flavored to werewolves. All of my I have Alpha Brawl in there, which is a terrible 8 mana magic card that like is super circumstantial, and it's in there because it's got a big werewolf wrecking face. Cool. And I went through this whole process, and I will say in 2 contradictory points, ever so slightly. One, not all werewolves are like lame in the sense that like, sorry, not quite that way. Let me put it this way. The not casting anything on your turn is somewhat subsidized by the fact that many of them have activated abilities. So you still have stuff to use your mana on and play the game without actively casting a spell, which does help. And 2, Tovolar. That's it. That's the whole answer. Tovolar just makes it night on your turn. And like without that, it's basically moot. You're right. It's the only place that it's good to play in the sense of like not having to track it so hard is Arena. It was an Arena mechanic that they thought, well, it'll do fine in paper. And every one of us were like, this was terrible. In Arena, at least Arena keeps track of whether or not it's day. And that's where the hiccup comes. It's not whether or not you're benefiting or not benefiting. You know, you don't play the game, so then you get a benefit. It's not necessarily the way it affects the gameplay itself. It's the fact that it's something that's really hard to track because you're keeping track of every player all doing this one thing. And it goes in perpetuity. It does not matter if you finally remove my last werewolf or even knocked me out of the game. I'm out of the game. You still have to track night and day. It goes on forever. And it's in the off chance that later on down the line, you play a card and it says Nightbound.
It's entirely, the only reason that you continue to keep track of it is because there's a very small chance, that you will play your Graveyard Trespasser and it's on the backside instead of the front side because it happened to be night at this point in the game. And it's unwieldy, the fact that it has to go amongst multiple players, but I will still stand by as a mechanic that you want to use. The main issue with it is that you are wanting to not push forward the game so that you can push forward the game later, and it turns an aggro deck into trying to play similarly to what a control deck does, and it just doesn't feel good. It doesn't feel good for me. I don't know how it feels for you. I do agree though, Tovolar. And Tovolar makes
Tovolar's the only reason.
Tovolar makes it
100%.
And so if you want to play werewolves, do play Tovolar as your leader because Tovolar makes the deck happen. And it's
they've tried. Oh yeah. They tried over the years, like in the middle trip to Innistrad, they put out Ulrich. Ulrich sucked worse than anything that they had in like the original Innistrad. They didn't even have a legendary. Huntmaster of the Fells was the big one, and it was not a legendary, so it didn't matter. And then when they printed Tovolar, they finally made one that was like half decent. And then it was in like the current era, which also made it like somewhat viable. If I didn't have Tovolar, I wouldn't have built a deck. I think that if there was any stat line on Tovolar that was worse, I mean, I might have still personally built it because it was finally like, but like the deck itself would have been actively worse. Like Tovolar being 3 mana and you only need 3 werewolves. So like by the time you play Tovolar, you're likely going to have 2 already. Right? You play like a 1-drop werewolf, or werewolf is the other key point too. Like if there was any difference on that card, it would have been possibly unplayable by comparison.
So,
absolutely. And as far as cube goes, if you didn't take from context what we were saying, I'm going to say it clear. Don't put this in your cube.
No.
For any reason. There's no card that cares about day night that is going to be worth your time and effort and like just mental capacity to put into your cube. Enjoy your cube. Don't make it harder on yourself by playing a mechanic that even people on Arena have trouble keeping track of when the program keeps track of it for you.
The only card that I ever would even imagine someone would try to come be like, but man, Adam, what about Celestis? Screw Celestis and get out of my house. Like, no,
Put
it's
any
not
other of the
worth it.
mana rocks that exist in Magic in the deck. There's tons of mana rocks that tap for a colorless and then also draw you a card at some point. Like the amount of effort that the Celestis, like, and maybe it does. I know people who say it does work. I put it in the werewolf one because it was like flavorful. And that's the only place I put it. Like, just put in something else.
Yeah, just put in.
You're fine. Else. 25,000 Magic cards. You telling me you can't find another mana rock?
For sure. Okay.
Anyway,
that's
also
all.
don't put mana rocks in your cube anyway. You got to balance your ramp. That's another story.
Yeah. Okay, here we come on the last one. Yep, we're going to talk about this last one real quick. So the last one is the newest one, the one that has been spoiled for the Lord of the Rings set coming out, and it is the Ring. All of the cards that deal with the ring tell you that the ring tempts you. That's the mechanic phrasing of it. So this is the way that works. When the ring tempts you, you get an emblem named the Ring if you don't have one. If you do have one, you move down to the next ability on the ring, and you choose a creature you control to become or remain what they call the ring bearer, the person holding the ring. So from what I understand, as you go down incrementally, you get the ones before it and the new mechanic. Is that right?
It's like the level up mechanic on, or like the for like the class enchantments, right?
Yeah.
So like everything that you have already achieved, this is an emblem that sits in the command zone, and everything you have already achieved remains for like the remainder of the game.
The remainder of the game, yes. So here's the thing that the rings can give your ring bearer. Your ring bearer is legendary and can't be blocked by creatures with greater power. So it can turn a non-legendary into a legendary and give it skulk. Whenever the ring bearer attacks, draw a card, then discard a card. You get to loot. Whenever the ring bearer becomes blocked by a creature, that creature's controller sacrifices it at the end of combat. Note that that is different from Death Touch, but still very, very good. In some ways better than Death Touch. And whenever your ring bearer deals combat damage to a player, each opponent loses 3 life. Also, just as a quick note, each player can only have one emblem named the Ring and only one ring bearer at a time. Just so you know.
The emblem part is like whatever. Everybody's that was probably pretty intuitive. The one ring bearer at a time thing is pretty important, though. It's possible that you might forget that like there was a ring bearer already. You need to, that's the thing that's going to be important to keep track of, because all of this stuff, and you can switch every time you're tempted. You can switch who your ring bearer is, which is cool. But only one person can be, like, only one creature can be your ring bearer at a time, which makes good sense. There is one ring that binds them, and there can't be multiple people carrying it. Unless, of course, you count like Samwise Gamgee, who was technically considered to be a ring bearer and treated just as highly as Frodo.
Yeah. So, talking about this mechanic, I think I do think that this mechanic is going to see play. Just like Monarch and Initiative, it does something to give you an incremental value. So far, we haven't seen a ton of stuff that has to do with like attacks making you tempt or combat damage making you tempt. So it looks like a fair amount of the things that we've seen with tempt are ETB triggers.
I will say that we haven't seen enough spoilers to know how parasitic this is going to be. And for those playing the home game, when we call something parasitic, it's how much in your deck you need to have of this mechanic in order for the deck to be viable using it. So like when we were speaking about, like, for example, the way we describe dungeons and initiative, it's a very parasitic mechanic. If you don't have enough of it in your deck, it doesn't do it. Whereas Monarch is not parasitic at all. You can have one card, and if you play it, it's good. So this is going to be a very parasitic mechanic, I think. I think with how many things that you're going to have to put in to advance yourself through. And also, as you pointed out, like there's one card that was spoiled already, which was Gandalf, who actively does not want to be the ring bearer. So, like with things like this in mind, that means that conversely, there's going to be creatures that very much want to be the ring bearer. I think actually the Frodo that they spoiled is supposed to
Yes.
want to be the ring bearer.
So the Frodo that was spoiled is kind of important to my feelings on the ring. So go ahead and explain what it does, and then we'll talk about it.
I'm gonna go with the 2-color one because it's simpler. Frodo Baggins is green and a white for a 1/3 halfling scout, and when it or another legendary creature enters the battlefield under your control, the ring tempts you. And then, as long as Frodo is your ring bearer, it must be blocked if able.
Mm-hmm. Notably, since it has Skulk, that means that it can only be blocked by things that have less power than it, and then
it's a 1/3. So
and then so your opponent is probably blocking with 1/1s, which just means that you get to kill their 1/1s as things go.
As a point of note, the other Frodo Sorin's Bane, is a 1/2. So both of these that. Wow. So also, it's got like a level up mechanic. I'm reading this one now too.
Yeah, this one's awesome. Actually,
Frodo Sorin's Bane is a 1 white for a 1/2 halfling citizen, and it has Orzhov. If Frodo is a citizen, it becomes a halfling scout with base power and toughness 2/3 and lifelink, and then 3 black. If Frodo is a scout, it becomes a halfling rogue, and whenever this creature deals combat damage to a player, that player loses the game if the ring has tempted you 4 or more times this game. Otherwise, the ring tempts you. There's your combat damage one.
So here's the thing about Frodo Sauron's Bane that's important for how I'm feeling about the ring. First off, just real quick, flavor-wise, don't like it. And that's only because it only gives you value. We have not yet seen a card that says anything about, like, if you've been tempted 10 times, you lose the game or something like that. Like, we've seen nothing that says that the ring is a bad thing. And
I have heard on the Intertrons that they actually spoke on this, and they were worried that if there was a negative effect to being tempted, that people would not play it, and so they chose not to.
I totally understand where they come from on that, and I don't think that that's necessarily wrong, because Magic players are first and foremost Magic players, despite whether or not they're into Lord of the Rings or whatever. But for me, I think flavor-wise, that was not a good idea. They should have done something.
No, I totally agree with you. Sure,
when you attack, right? Lose 1 life every time.
Lose a life for each time you've been tempted.
Yeah. Something like
on each
that.
upkeep, right? Like, anyway,
yeah,
because that's still a thing, especially if like you do something like you said, like Sorin's Bane gains lifelink on one of their level ups, right? So like you could definitely counteract that, but this has been, again, I'm not the first to this party. The internet has spoken when they're speaking about whether or not this mechanic should have been having a negative connotation. The flavor of a Universes Beyond set should have kept that true.
Yes,
I get that, like, as a Magic player, and this is modern legal. This is Eternal Formats legal. So like it could see play, and they wanted it to try and see play, and they sacrificed what should have been all flavor just because it's very specifically a Universes Beyond set.
Yep.
Don't tease me with all this flavor that's everywhere else in the set, and then like the one pivotal moment that it's the Lord of the what?
Yeah, it's like literally this is the title. This is the most important thing to land the flavor on, and I'm very sad that it's botched.
Yeah.
Now that I've gotten that out of the way, talking about the mechanic itself, I think that this is going to be just fine in Sealed and Draft. You're going to want to play like it is. I think you're right in the fact that when you're constructing for it, it's going to be a very parasitic mechanic. You are going to need a lot of instances of it, because you don't just want the Skulk effect. You don't just want the loot effect. You want to be able to, when you deal damage, attack and deal damage, you are skulking, looting. If they block you, they have to sacrifice the creature, and dealing 3 damage to each opponent along the way. When you're playing in Commander, you want to be dealing all 4 of those all the time, which means it is going to have to take up a significant portion of your deck. And we just don't know how many cards are going to have tempt and allow you to do tempt that are going to be a thing. But in sealed and draft, I think this is going to be fine. I would say even in like a set constructed format, this is probably going to be okay.
Couldn't tell you.
Yeah.
Probably like set constructed. Like, I gotta keep in mind, like, this is the only set this is ever going to be in, right? Like, it's the kind of mechanic that they will not ever be able to reprint.
Yeah.
For any reason at all, really. Like, they might get away with the universes within, maybe, right? How they've redone some of the like the Stranger Things and the Walking Dead's finally getting a universes within.
Yeah.
So like there's a chance we'll see some of these, maybe a secret layer with these being reprinted with fancier art or something like that. Pictures of like Viggo Mortensen, because that's what the internet's all about right now, and I don't want to talk about it.
Yeah.
But the mechanic itself is just going to basically be the only thing we can count on for sure is that it's going to be in this set and nothing else. There's the off chance we're going to see it elsewhere. So like your only real options for set constructed, like what would you even do? A couple of modern staples into basically a set constructed deck, right?
Right. And it's just like, so in general, I don't think this is going to see a ton of play in like other constructed in Commander and things like that, unless the cards are really good, which it's possible, but not super likely.
It's not proven to be, ironically. I think that we're not going to see this very much tall, if I'm being honest, anywhere.
As far as adding it to your cube, though, for me, I'd say it's probably okay. Similar to what you were talking about with initiative, it's like there is a certain amount of complication that exists from only putting one or two of these in the thing. But since there's so little, like it's a very linear process, it doesn't have choice elements added into it. Just like giving yourself the ability to have skulk on a creature is okay. It's fine. It doesn't do a lot, but it doesn't do nothing, right?
I don't know. I think it doesn't. I think it takes up too much real estate for its benefit, in the sense of like, if you are going to put in, say, one thing that tempts you, as soon as that creature goes, like if somebody just like, okay, cool, you made it your ring bearer, swords, it's gone now. Sure. And you can't get you can't get another ring bearer until you play another tempts with the ring. So you need to have enough in there that you can continuously reactivate who is your ring bearer. And that's not just to like get you down the track. The skulk is fine, but like if that's the case, put in a creature with skulk. Put in one of the cards.
See, though, I think that scenario you're talking about, to me, is the fun part about it, though, because to me that means that I have created a situation that makes something that normally they don't care about removing something that they're going to try to remove. So for me, that's a redirect of a kill spell. Which
I don't know. I was gonna try and take out your 10/10 flyer anyway. You know what I mean? Like if you put this into perspective, like if these things, no, but like if these things come in and you it says tempt with the ring, it's those creatures are likely going to be small, right? Like if it says tempt with the ring, make me your ring bearer, please. Then they were going to be small anyway, and I don't care if you hit me with a 1/1. I'm not going to touch that. So you put in a 1/1 that I can't block, and then when you go to equip it, I'm going to remove it. Sure. If you go to enchant it, I'm going to remove it. If you go, okay, so I'm tempted with the ring with this feller, I'm going to make that big thing my ring bearer. I was probably, and especially in a cube, I was probably looking at your 10/10 scared anyway. So like, and also with greater power, I don't have a 12/12 to block it anyway.
Right. Well, see, that's the thing, is that's why I don't even think about it as a thing for those kind of decks. Like for me, I'm thinking like, you throw this on a 1/1, your opponent's like, okay, fine, your 1/1 has skulk, and if you try to do anything with it, I'll do it. But that gives you an opportunity to play a 10/10 with flying, because it's like, okay, well, I've got Vorpal Sword in my cube for whatever reason. I'm having fun with this skulk mechanic, might as well have it. I'll throw Vorpal Sword on it and swing in, and then your opponent's like, well, I got to remove that because I'm not dealing with a Vorpal Sword right now. It's like, cool, that's one less removal spell I've got to worry about in a cube setting for when I drop my big big boy. That's one less swords on the boards, as you might say.
So then I guess we're arguing the same point. Like,
Yeah.
put it in or don't, because in
Put
any
it in or
case, it
don't.
doesn't make a difference. And I
Yeah.
think that's maybe why I say don't.
I get that.
Right?
I follow
Right?
that.
Like, you're saying it doesn't make a difference. I mean, it's going to eat a removal spell. I'm saying it
Mhm.
doesn't make a difference because I'm
Yeah.
not going to care about it
Yeah.
because it's not impactful enough.
And
so, if you're going to put something in your cube, make it fun, make it impactful, or make it do a thing that you need your cube to do.
Mhm. I follow that, but I would say also one of the big things we tell people every single time when they're trying to build a cube is put in what you want, right? And this is not going to harm, unlike some of the other ones we've talked about, like Daybound, Nightbound. This will not harm your cube by adding it if it's something that you want to do. It's not going to add so much calculus to the game that it's going to be wild, right?
No, that's fair. And like I am saying this agnostic of that because I can't keep falling back on it as like my recommendation. Play what you want.
Yeah.
Put your favorites in. Figure it right. Like I have to come up with answers to these things that are like right.
Yeah.
So like
I guess that's true.
Ignore me if you really like Frodo Baggins, right?
Yeah. I'll say that. If you're asking me for my advice, hey, do I put a bunch of cards in here to tempt the ring into my cube? No. No. Do you really like it? Nah. Okay, no. Yeah.
Right? Like right and again, you're gonna have to do the same thing where like you're gonna have to look at how many cards. I don't know how big the set is, but how many of these garbage like draft chaffs are you gonna have to cram in to get critical mass of them in your cube to actually see them drafted into a Tempt the Ring deck?
For sure. I definitely wouldn't want to have to try to build a deck that is specifically trying to get to the 4 of Tempting the Ring, even in a cube with allowing multiple copies, so that I could throw 4 of the common Tempt the Ring or whatever, and it just it wouldn't feel good to have to try to draft.
Like at face value and without the entirety of the spoilers, we're both right. This isn't going to change anything. So if you love it, put it in. It's not going to break anything. If you don't love it, don't put it in. You're not missing a thing. And more to the like, even in the constructed, like, I don't think if you don't put this in your cube, you're probably never going to see it.
Yeah,
if I'm being honest.
Yeah,
I think that like the set is going to be it's going to be opened only by collectors for the most part. It's so freaking expensive. It's got a bunch of cards that are going to play with each other and very little else. And unless you get a Commander Precon, because there's a handful of Commander Precons. So if you get the Commander Precon and it's got any of these in there, hey, cool for you. But like in general, I think that it's going to be just the kind of thing where it's going to be like the Warhammer decks where like you see some cards matter and you occasionally see. I haven't played against a Warhammer deck since they came out. And I think this is going to be a lot like that.
I think that's 100% true. And while I'll be very excited to pick up my Radagast for 50 cents and build my Bird and Beast deck that will not be very good, but will be very fun for me, I do think that mostly, I will tell people, we do know that in some way, shape, or form, the Great Henge is getting reprinted in the set as the party tree. Be ready to pick up your old henges when this drops, because they will probably fall when
so what, 60 instead of 70?
I mean, even if you can get it down to like 45, do it.
The cynic in me, man, like the cynic in me wants those things to be $10. They're not worth that money. They just like, and like a ton were, well, not a ton. It was right at the top of the pandemic, but like, how many other things from Throne have maintained that price tag? Very few. But my Embercleave is $6.
Right.
Now. Like,
more so what I'm saying is that if this party tree is in one of the commander decks that's coming out in the set, please go pick up the Precon and enjoy it. We don't know. All it's shown so far is like a very nice looking one, so it's probably going to be like collector booster only.
I'm looking at it now, and it's like it's a really high number, and it says Tales of Middle Earth Commander. So I think that it's going to just be, and honestly, it's pre-sailing for $200. So it's probably it's probably collector booster only.
But if for some reason it's not, go grab yourself a great henge if they spike down low enough, and keep one and just have it in your inventory, because there's a good chance we're not going to see great henge again in Wilds of Eldraine. Just saying.
No, if anything, it'll end up being like a reprint into one of the supplementary sets.
Mm-hmm.
It'll be like a command, because it's a commander staple as much as anything else. Mm-hmm. So anyway, I digress. We're not a MTG Finance podcast by any stretch, but gang, that's that. Play Monarch as much as possible. Largely ignore the rest. They have yet to duplicate their success, and I hope they do, because honestly, these things are great. Monarch is one of the best. Everybody, find me somebody who doesn't like Monarch, and I will show you a Yu-Gi-Oh player. Like, really, it's so good. Everybody loves it. It always adds a bunch to the game, and easy to stack into things, easy to put into commander decks, easy to put into cubes, even in like a regular old cube. Like Conspiracy was a 1v1 like at draft environment, right? And so they still put Monarch in there, and all you were doing was trading blows with the one other person across the table.
No, sorry. Conspiracy was a 4-person pod.
Oh, was it?
Yeah.
Okay, 4-person pod.
So it was built with the same intentions in mind that we use it in Commander, which is awesome, because where does it make the most impact? Where does Monarch see the most impact? Is in Commander, right?
Yeah.
And it's fun.
Ignore the rest, honestly. Like, as much as unless you, and again, Matt already called me out, I guess. If you like it, ignore us wholeheartedly. If you're one of the weird people who enjoys day and night, fill your boots, friend. Put them in. Play your favorites. It's your cube. Just follow all the other things we always say. Make sure that your archetypes are supported. Make sure your power is balanced. If you're going to put in day-night, make sure you have stuff that's equally as underpowered to make sure that the day-night stuff has a shot. If you're going to play something like Dungeons, make sure that you have enough stuff to support Dungeons, because you're going to have to put enough that everyone, because these cards are going to get picked up as one-offs if they're everywhere anyway, even if they're not great. You're going to end up with your Varus getting picked by the green player, even though they're not going to be focusing on it. So you're going to have to make sure there's enough throughout the cube to support enough of this effect. What was the other one? This ring thing. Whenever it comes about, take a look at it. If you're a diehard Lord of the Rings fan, you want to make a Lord of the Rings cube. I think personally, the Lord of the Rings set will do an amazing set cube. Take 4 boxes, sleeve them up, or actually count it all out. Like, do something like that. I think that if you because it's going to be a great draft experience, regardless of what I think about anything else. I think that if you were going to sit down and you were going to draft the Lord of the Rings set, you were going to have a good time. And every time you go to play it with your friends, you're going to end up reliving the joy of being like, oh yeah, I remember when they printed Tom Bombadil. Although that's a commander deck, but whatever. Yeah. But as they're play, I think it is in it.
Throw in the precons as part of the set cube.
Sure,
might as well.
Right? Oh my god! Right? Or just build your own cube. Make a Lord of the Rings Magic the Gathering cube. Do whatever you want with it. Build it however you want. I think that's your best bet. I think that it's not going to be impactful enough if you put it in your regular cube, unless you just really like a card because you like the art. Again, do whatever you want. Right. It's your cube. But
so I think
keep these things in mind.
I think the thing I want to end on, though, is just from a development standpoint, building these external mechanics is tough. They managed to hit it out of the park with Monarch, and I think the only reason that Monarch managed to stay an out of the park thing is because they've been very sparing on when they add it to other things. The other ones, being parasitic mechanics, actually need the opposite treatment. You need to see them more often. They need more exposure so that you can fine tune into something that you go, okay, I can build a commander deck around this now. I can build a cube with extra venture into the dungeon cards or whatever. So when you're talking about developing a mechanic similar to this, understand that it's not always going to be a home run. You're not always going to hit that sweet spot on the first try. And that is what playtesting and development and extra cards is for. So if you put something like Tempt the Ring in, you better hope that it works well in the set that you brought it out in, because you've put it linked to a product that you're never going to be able to replicate again. So make it happen, or take the time to make sure that it's done right.
But I would also love to hear from you if you have come up with your own house rule that creates an external mechanic. That's something that I'm always looking forward to. Also, if you think we have been wrong about any of these, please don't at me if you love Lord of the Rings. I also love Lord of the Rings, and I'm not trying to call them out specifically. just talking about the mechanics. And again, I play day night, so you can't get at me if you like day night.
And if you think that I'm wrong and you want to at me, bro, let's go. 2-on-2.
Oh, tons of things that you can at me about. It's just not those things because I'm actively playing them myself. But hit us up down in the comments below or hit us up on any of the socials. Tell us how you feel about Monarch or any of these other mechanics. If you've had good experiences or if you've had a bad experience with Monarch, I'd also be interested to know. These are the things that I would like to hear from you. Hit us up, socials, down below in the comments, or all those other fun things. You're about to hear where you can find to do all that in the outro that I will append to this after we finish up and I edit it. Matt, thank you so much for hanging out with me today.
Always.
And gang, we will catch you next time on Unlimited Commander. Have a great time.
Bye.
If you liked what we had to say, consider supporting us on Patreon. Your support goes directly to growing and improving the show.
You can also like, follow, and subscribe on YouTube or your favorite podcast app. Make sure to comment or leave a review. The cast can also be found on Twitter at Unlimited Commander.
You can find Matt's Twitch, Twitter, and other YouTube projects at knowledgepoolmtg.com.
And Adam can be found on Twitch and Twitter at Adamus_Prime86.
Our theme song is Polaroid by Harris Heller, licensed by Creative Commons.